Hello, my name is Victor Baez, and I am a sophomore and civil engineer student. I took this course because I actually really like geography. I really enjoyed this course. For this assignment, I chose option A, and I chose to read House of Dawn by N. Scott Momaday, or Momday, I'm assuming. So, there we go. So, first question is explain how Abel's relationship to the environment and landscape of his ancestral home, Jemez Pueblo, changes over the course of the novel. And what I've noticed with Abel throughout the book, I mean, I've noticed this with experiences with a lot of Native Americans, being here from Albuquerque, is that you can never really tell their true intentions because they're internal, and on the outside it's almost like they're pan. And I can tell with Abel that after he murders the white man and moves to LA, I think there's an initial longing for um, his pueblo and the land. He talks about going south to the rocks with his grandfather and partaking in some race. He talks about going to the trading post on his black horse and meeting the cornfield girl. He talks about traveling as in his youth, and I think he longs for it internally, of course. I mean, who doesn't long for their homeland? But I think due to the experiences that he goes through and the relocation and seeing how the culture and the society is set up in Los Angeles, and he knows that there is more opportunities there. He knows that it is more civilized, yes, as far as industrial. But I don't think he likes it. I think he would have liked to remain in his pueblo, and I think that that decision after he had murdered the white man, I think everything changed for his life after that. To carry on with the first question, I just wanted to add from the previous clip that when I meant that after he had murdered the white man that everything changed, I meant that his perceptions on life changed as well. When he went back to the Pueblo after his downfall in LA with Benali, and I realized that like everything just seemed cold and dark, and he would talk about the shadows of the Black Mesa, and he would talk about the darker features that the mesa and that the landscape brought. In the beginning, I noticed that he enjoys the way the landscape is prior to being relocated, and I think that's because he doesn't feel uh, any type of resentment or any type of resentment. Yes, resentment. I'm sorry, and I think that in some way, the way he describes and connects people to description of nature, as far as his mother being described as the sound of water, as soft as water, and I think that maybe the Black Mesa and the land was Abelito, it was Abel, and after he left and he basically threw away his life through his drinking problem, and he returned back and the land was arid and dark, and I think this kind of reflects people and their environments in general and how they are intertwined. I mean, we talk about Millie, and Millie comes from I'm assuming a Midwest town if it's the 1950s, and she talks about leaving as a child, so it must have been 1930s around the Dust Bowl era where crop yields were at the worst times in this country, and I feel that people in that era, I I've noticed because through my great grandmother are hard and they work till they die, and I think this reflects the severity of that era, especially for certain people like Abel. Um, and when he came back, I think that it was the land that had died, like his grandfather had died, and he laid and looked at his grandfather, and it seemed irresponsible to just leave him with Father Olin. But I mean, the careless darkness of the land is reflecting the carelessness that Abel has now, and the downfall of a man. So that's my answer to question one. So question two In this novel, different environments and landscapes are almost like characters in a story. Why do you think the novelist Anne Scott Momday gave the geography and landscape such power in his storytelling? I actually kind of went over this on the last question, and I actually find that the reason why Momday relates geography to, as far as the human body, I mean, humorously, I have driven by certain landscapes with my grandfather or various relatives, and we've made jokes, and I can't say them on camera, but we've made jokes of landscapes relating to certain parts of the human body, and I think that it's a natural thing. I think that as humans, we do that. I mean, we look at ourselves in the mirror, or we at least, in some form of way, deal with the natural form of our bodies, and it's a natural process to do that. It's not very successful, um, usually, but N. Scott Momday does a great storytelling in this book. I think that when he describes um, Abel's mother, mother's voice as being soft as water, I think I actually kind of wrote that down. I used that as almost a technique, maybe going out on a date, because it's a really nice piece of wording, and there's a lot of piece of wordings like that throughout the book. I mean, the book gets pretty steamy. I mean, Abel does have an affair. Well, the white woman he has an affair with, um, when describing her body and describing his body being hard as rocks, his back hard as rocks, and you know, it's funny because this is the first book I've actually read that intense like that, and I thought about it, and at first it is you get a little embarrassed, but then you really think about it, and you're like, wow, it is really feels like hard as rocks, and I think these relations, throughout the whole book, they're amazing, and they actually piqued my interest and continued my reading and continued me to care about reading this novel, not just for the grade, but because it was actually a great piece of literature. And Mom Day does this quite a bit. I could probably open a page and find a part where he makes some type of um, relation. Let's see. Like here, he says, she had been too tired for guilt and gladness, and she lay for a long time in the edge of sleep, empty of the least desire in the warm current of her blood. I mean, when you regard to blood, you don't really refer to it as a current, like a river or a water. And he does these type of relations, and I mean, they kind of get you thinking. You're like, wow, it really is. Your blood really does flow in your body like a river, like um, a current would. And I mean, I just opened the book and found that right away, and you see these almost every single page, these relations, and there's so many of them. And I think it gives his book power, and it not in the sense that it makes it better than other novels, but it definitely takes it away from other novels. It makes it unlike other novels. I've never read a novel that made as many relations to the geography as and Scott Momday did. So question 3 asks, in what ways are Abel and other characters impacted by settler colonialism? Throughout the stories told in this novel, explain some of the relationship Abel has with people from settler European ethnic groups. If I can go based off the roots of his upbringing, I'm assuming that Abelito, and Francisco don't have a very keen um, perception for white people. The reason why is on Francisco's deathbed, he's literally saying Diablo Blanco, Diablo Blanco. He says that the cold was brought by the white man, that the white man brought the frost, and that the suffering and the darkness that the land has repped was because of the white man. And I think this carries on into uh, Abel's life. Obviously, he kills a white Native American. I mean, he might have not been full blooded. He could have been a mestizo, definitely. Um, but he definitely killed a white man because of the color of his skin, not because of the characteristic of his personality, and that's obviously told and shown through the conversation that he and the white man have, until upon his death. And I think this is a common feeling that the Native Americans have with um, white people, especially the ones that were relocated in Los Angeles. Contrary to counter the clip that I previous to this one, I do believe that Benali's experience with white people was different in his experience in northern Arizona. He talks of Sam Shirley, a trading post named Fraser, manager named Fraser, and it's kind of weird how they all actually attend, they dance, and I don't know if Sam Shirley is native, but it sounds like a white name, and um, he actually advises him to go talk to this cute, he calls her the cornfield girl, and I mean, I don't know if Benali actually has hard feelings towards white people. He does describe his supervisor Daniel as impatient and kind of unintelligent. He almost seems like Benali could run uh, the factory at a better rate than Daniel can. He's more aware and observant than it seems than his supervisor. But besides the fact, I think that Benali Benali's experience with white people was different than Abel's, definitely, and less hostile. To add on to that prior clip, I also believe that Benali actually admired the modernization of Los Angeles and the amenities that came with Los Angeles, and um, the industrial complex of Los Angeles. Really, he kind of says like, who wouldn't admire this? And this is because, I mean, you come from a reservation where there is no uh, public industry, there is no uh, plumbing, there's no water, there's so I mean, of course the amenities are going to be admired, but I feel like the hatred for white people that Abel has is totally different from Benali. um, Abel hates the complexion itself, the skin color, and I think this is because they're raised different. um, you have Abel, who was raised by his grandfather, who was a conservative native man who held on to his beliefs and passed them down as his ancestors did before him. And I think that the whole idea of settler colonialism um, drove Abel mad. And I mean, I think it would drive anyone mad if they would see these complexes built on former homeland to different types of tribes. And I think that it's a totally different feeling for people who are deeply affected by settler colonialism, like Francisco and Abel's ancestors, who had to endure more, um, who endured more from Spanish colonialism, and those tribes who endured colonialism in California and I mean all over the U.S. I mean, certain tribes endured different types of settler colonialism as far as the impact. Some of it was good, but the majority of it was bad. And what it seems from where Abel's from in Hemis, that it was a very bad experience with the white population that had invaded their land. And it seems like there's still a hard feeling because Abel does kill the albino a man who rides a horse better than him. And he does this because I don't know if because he rides a horse better than him or because he is white. And although we never know truly, it does seem like that is the case. That was the motive. So, question 4: what examples of religious syncretism can you find in this novel? What does this tell us about the cultural geography of New Mexico? And this is a big one, and it's obvious, especially if you grew up here. I mean, I am mestizo myself, so um, the biggest form of syncretism that I found was Francisco, the elder from the village, and Abel's grandfather. Francisco is a sacristan within the Catholic Church, but he's also a native man who is believed to pass on his ancestral beliefs to his kin. So you get a man who reveres God and Jesus as his Lord and Savior, but also holds on to the stories of how things came to be from what he learned from his ancestries. And I actually really adored this. This was something that I found super, super interesting. Um, he talks about how the Big Dipper came to be and how certain landscapes came to be through stories, and how certain animals came to be through stories. And I like it. And it reminds me of the book of Genesis, where it says that God um, created light on the first day, on and on, creates the animals. And I mean, we have this picture in our head that, like, how did he create the animals? Did he just drop them in there and they just were made? Or were they made from the ground? Were they made from the rain? Did the and you we get a little bit of this in the book, as he talks about animals being born from the land, being born from the earth. And I think that, I mean, it's an interesting point, definitely, especially if you believe in evolution, because you might have a different uh, view. But this was the biggest form of syncretism that I found in this novel. Um, Another form of syncretism I found was with Angela when she visits Abel in the hospital in Los Angeles. She tells him the story that she made up, she conjured on her own mind, and she talks about the maiden bear and how the maiden bear came to be with the elders at top of the mountain, and how the bear is from the mountain and the snake is from the plain. And it's a really interesting story, and it's intricate, and she's a white woman, a wealthy white woman. So for her to tell such of almost a Native American story, I mean a Native American story, um, it's a really point for this religious syncretism. I think she took in when she had her affair with Abel, and she must have accustomed and learned things from him. And I think the biggest thing that this tells us about the geography in Mexico, especially with the Catholic Church, um, which was predominantly enforced by the Spanish royalty at the time when Spain came from uh, Mexico and worked their way up to the cities of gold, or the cities of gold that they never found. And it just shows how, although into the 20th century, there was still um, religious syncretism between the two groups of uh, Spanish colonialism, as far as the Catholic Church and Native Americans, and almost how the U.S. government um, kept this form of syncretism and conversion uh, in hand, because it would be much easier to assimilate into the majority of the Christian population. So, question 5: what is the attitude of different religious leaders towards their parishioners or congregations throughout the story? Explain how Abel's religious experiences change when he is in different places. Um, I did notice that him and Father Oglin's and Father Nicholas's relationships are complex. Although Father Nicholas never met Abel, Father Nicholas knew Abel's forebears, and so there is obviously almost a lineage connected between, or Abel's lineage connected to the Catholic Church. There's always been a relationship there. Um, and almost a bridge between peoples, as Francisco is the sacristan of the church alongside Father Ogin. And I think that Abel is okay with this in Pueblo, in this Pueblo, and it's a natural thing for him. I don't think he thinks too much about it. But then once he gets relocated to LA and he finds Tosama, Big John, or Big Buff, actually, Tosama, and he's a manipulator. And Father Ogin was kind of more direct and straight, and I mean, you wouldn't catch him doing what Tosama did. Um, and when Tosama speaks to his crowd, the response is different. It's a very different experience Abel goes through when he visits his church in that I think dirty underground basement. Maybe it was a basement. It wasn't somewhere very nice. It was definitely wasn't a church. Um, and I think that Abel almost loses faith in religion, but gains faith in experience when he visits Tosama's religious experience, and I don't. This is the hardest question definitely in this prompt, because when Francisco dies and Abel just says, here's my grandfather's body, and he leaves. Um, but it's a, I don't know, it's a different feeling. I feel like he doesn't care about the white quote unquote religion too much. I think that he is way more interested in his old customs, and I feel like um, he has a natural feeling to want to know more about it, but he can't, because it's kind of been stripped away, and his only source was Francisco, and Francisco had recently been taken away. Um, but I almost feel like Abel loses his faith throughout the book, and I think that had something to do with his drinking problem. There was no morale. There was nothing, no backbone for him to rely on and to stop him from drinking and to better his life. And I think that relocating to Los Angeles and that first religious experience didn't give him the morality that this man needed. And I just I don't know if it would have happened in Pueblo if he would have done his prison time for killing the albino, but then remained in Pueblo. Maybe the people would have, you know, been terrified of Abel, but I definitely think that his relationship with Father Ogin could have been embittered uh, through you know, a savior mentality. He could have approached Abel and try to introduce morality through God. But this is a what if. And with that, I can say that Abel's religious experience um, is diminished throughout the book and towards the end. So, question 6: what challenges does Abel have to overcome in his life and his personal journey? What challenges are due to his identity as an indigenous person? I feel like um, Abel has definitely been through a lot. He has been through war, especially one of the probably the worst war in human history. He, I mean, is part of a region that has been subjugated to settler colonialism, mass genocide, and I mean, religious stripping, environmental stripping. The herds of buffalo are no more. I mean, there's a lot that has changed for these people, and I feel like as a Native American, you are naturally challenged due to the state of your environment, and that's not an offense or anything. I'm just saying due to the fact that Native Americans have been the most, um, I mean, they've endured the most genocide than any other group in human history. What challenges does Abel have to overcome in his life and his personal journey? I think that I don't know actually quite remember by the end of the book if he overcomes alcoholism, but I do know that throughout the novel, at least while he was in LA, his alcoholism is peaked and actually leads to him returning back to Pueblo, where I think he uh, withers out and probably ends up dying or not doing much with his life unless he had a change of heart, which I don't know. But other than that, I think that he also overcomes a lot of internal hate that he has for white people. I think that living in Los Angeles opens his uh, eyes maybe a little more that not all white people are devils, but um, I don't think that um, he hates them as much. Obviously, he's not going around and killing white people as he did in Pueblo, and I don't know. This is something that's internal, and you can kind of tell as you read about how plain and pan he is with white people. I mean, his response and like with Daniel, the supervisor, he wanted to hit Daniel so bad when Daniel was scolding him about his work, and I feel like former Abel would have killed him. Actually, I feel like former Abel would have lost his bananas and hurt the man. But instead, he refrains and he walks away. And I think this is something that he learned from his imprisonment. He realized that the violence is not gonna do his internal just. It's not gonna make him feel better. If anything, it's gonna make him feel worse because he's gonna feel bad. He's a very sensitive being, and I think this is one of the things he overcomes in his life. Um, what challenges are due to his identity as an indigenous person? Obviously, like I just said, I mean, we all have, not we all have, but some groups definitely have prejudices against certain groups because of situations that we were put in, as far as reservations, and I'm sure the Native American population has certain prejudices towards white people because of this um, factor as an indigenous person, that your people were relocated and stripped from their land. And I feel like this is probably the biggest challenge to Abel, knowing that there could have been more stories to come. And he learns these stories from Francisco, and he shares them with Angela, and he shares them with Millie, and he shares them with Benali, and but then they run out because eventually the stories that he learned, he had said them all. And I find that when Angela tells him a new story, I feel like that was probably one of the highlights of his Twilights, because he hasn't heard a new story such as that. There's not many stories such as that due to the numbers of the people who were creating such stories don't exist anymore. And this is probably one of the challenges that I think not only Abel but a lot of Native Americans go through, especially in this novel. They revere these stories as gold, and it's a challenge um, to want to keep these alive, to pass them on to your kin. What did you like best about this novel? What did you like the least? I thought this was, if not one of the best pieces of literature I've ever read. Um, I wasn't really a big reader in the past few years, and I had been recently actually talking about how I need to get back into reading. And so, when given the opportunity, and I was like, you know what, this one's about somewhere so close to where I'm from, it has to be interesting. And thank God I read it, because it was. It had a love story, it had a love story within the environment, a love for your religious culture, and I love how Mom Day explains the land that we're from. I mean, I'm from here too, so I notice when he talks about the mesas, and he talks about the gullies and the gorge, and he talks about all these geographies that I've seen. He talks about the road to Bloomfield that comes down from the Vallecito Mountains. I love those mountains. I kayak in those mountains, and to hear this in literature is amazing. And I don't find many pieces of literature that regard to aspects of my life, and I feel like that's because this isn't mainstream literature, and I don't even know what to call mainstream literature, but the literature that obviously doesn't make Hollywood, that doesn't make the big screen, and that's just the type of era that we're in. So to find something like this was to find gold. It was to find silver. It was to find something of value, and I will always hold on to this book. And I actually purchased this book. I rented it from the library, but I purchased it online because of how much I liked it. Um, I thought that the connections between the human body and the environment, being an environmental engineer, and having an ecocentric view as a Christian, it was very nice to see that syncretism, and that it is alive. And I feel one out of a million when I tell people that I think that my faith should be eco based, based on the environment. And a lot of people look at me weird, but this book is living proof on how we should live our life as such, and how we can live our life as such. And I really liked it. I really did. Um, what I'm not saying this because I'm a young man, but I was not expecting the sections where he is having sex with Angela to be so intense, actually. And um, at first it was confusing. You can feel the attraction that she has for him, and you know that she's watching him. And at first you're like, wow, is this really happening? And then Mom Day gets into the description of their encounter, and I was reading it while walking on the treadmill at the gym, and I was like, wow, this is a really getting hot in here, and it was a great book. I don't know what if I can say any I liked least. I liked the whole story. It's hard to say. I liked everything. I mean, what I didn't like, and it's not that I don't like it in the novel, it's that the truth behind alcoholism within the Native American community is saddening to me, and I guess you can say that's something I don't like um, in the book, but it is the truth, so I do understand why it is in there. Um, but it's it just reflects the reality behind fire, water, how I mean it really did do damage to that community and continues to do damage to that community. And I think that Mom Day, casually, I mean, because it is casual, but it casually explains how bad it gets, how progressive his alcoholism gets throughout the book, and it's just so frustrating to watch, being a family member of someone who has lost people from cirrhosis and from alcoholic related diseases, that it resonates in the back of your mind, and it takes you back to a time of suffering, and it makes you tear up. And I think that's what I didn't like the least, and reading that Abel couldn't stop, and almost to the point of death. And it's real. The addiction is real, and that's the probably the least thing I liked in the book. But other than that, Housemaid of Dawn by N. Scott Momday was in the top 5 of books I've ever read.